I came home to surprise my daughter. Instead, I found her hooked up to a ventilator, and the man she married was nowhere to be seen. My name's Gabriel Barnes, 61 years old, 28 years as an Army combat medic. I've patched up soldiers on the worst days of their lives. Nothing prepared me for walking into a Denver hospital and seeing my own daughter, Olivia, lying there with a tube down her throat. Her husband's name is Logan Baker. Remember that name, because while Olivia was fighting for her life, Logan was 3,000 miles away, and he knew exactly what was happening to her. Let me back up. I just finished my last deployment, a medical relief mission overseas, 12-hour shifts, no cell signal for weeks at a time. I didn't tell Olivia I was coming home early. I wanted to knock on her door and see her face. I had a stupid grin on the whole cab ride to her house in Aurora. The house looked wrong before I even got out of the car. Grass overgrown, newspapers piled on the porch. Nobody answered the door. I used the spare key she gave me 2 years ago. Inside, it smelled like nobody had opened a window in a month. Dishes crusted in the sink. Her phone charger still plugged in on the nightstand. Phone missing. I called her, straight to voicemail. I called Logan, same thing. I called her office. Her coworker went quiet for a second too long before telling me Olivia hadn't shown up to work in over 2 weeks. Logan had emailed HR saying she was dealing with a personal matter. That was it. No details. I started calling hospitals. The third one I tried, a nurse named Yasmin, confirmed it. Olivia had been admitted 16 days ago, severe pneumonia. She'd coded once already. She was in the ICU. I didn't remember the drive there. I remember running through the doors and saying my name, saying I was her father, and a doctor named Ashton Perry walking toward me with the kind of face that tells you before he says a word. "She's been intubated for over a week," he said. "Nobody's come to see her. We've been trying to reach her husband." Nobody had come. 16 days. My daughter alone in a room full of machines, and the man who promised to stand by her hadn't shown up once. I stood outside that glass window and looked at her. Tubes in her arm, a machine breathing for her, her face sunken in a way I'd never seen on my own kid. I picked up her phone from the belongings bag in the closet. Her thumbprint still worked. What I found in her messages made my hands shake. Logan knew she was sick. He knew she couldn't breathe, and 3 days before she was rushed in, his last text to her said she was being dramatic. Then I opened his location on a shared app she still had running. He wasn't 3,000 miles away on a business trip like he told her coworkers. He was 40 minutes from that hospital, and he'd been there the whole time. If this story's got your blood already boiling, wait till you see what I found next. Subscribe if you want to hear how a father deals with a man like Logan Baker, because I promise you, I wasn't done.
I sat in a plastic chair outside Olivia's room and stared at that phone until the screen went dark on its own. 40 minutes away, the whole time. I scrolled back through the location history. Logan hadn't left Colorado at all. He told her coworkers he was in Chicago for a client meeting. He told the neighbors he was handling something for work. But the little blue dot on that map had been sitting in the same spot for 2 weeks, an apartment complex off Colfax Avenue, 20 minutes from downtown. I didn't know what I was looking at yet. Part of me wanted it to be something simple, a hotel, a work thing gone quiet. Anything that wasn't what my gut already knew. Nurse Yasmin came in to check Olivia's vitals. She was gentle about it, but I could see her sizing me up, the way people do when they're not sure how much to say. "Has anyone else been by?" I asked her, her husband. She hesitated. "We called the emergency contact number 3 times a day for the first week, voicemail every time. Then it stopped ringing at all, like the number was blocked or the phone was off. Off. Not out of service. Off." I asked to see the admission paperwork. Olivia had driven herself here, not called an ambulance, driven herself at 2 in the morning, gasping, and checked herself into the ER alone. The intake nurse's note said she kept apologizing for making a scene. That detail sat in my chest like a stone. My daughter, drowning in her own lungs, apologizing. I called my old Army buddy, Harley Clark. Harley run background searches for a private security firm now, the kind of guy who could find out where a man got his coffee before sunrise. I gave him Logan's name and the address off Colfax. "Give me 20 minutes, Harley said. While I waited, I sat back down next to Olivia's bed. I held her hand, cold, too light, nothing like the hand that used to grab mine at the airport every time I came home on leave. I told her I was there. I told her I wasn't leaving this time. I don't know if she heard any of it, but I needed to say it out loud anyway. Harley called back faster than I expected. "That apartment's not his," he said. "It's leased to a woman named Louise Reyes, 29, real estate agent, been on the lease 8 months. 8 months. Olivia and Logan had been married 4 years. I asked Harley to check one more thing, Logan's card statements, if he could get anywhere close to legal on that. He went quiet a second, then said he'd make a call to someone who owed him a favor. 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a screenshot. Restaurant charges, a jewelry store, 2 round-trip flights to Cabo, booked the week before Olivia was hospitalized. One name on the ticket, not hers. I sat there staring at 2 plane tickets while my daughter breathed through a machine 3 feet from me. Dr. Perry stepped in to update me on her numbers. Her fever was down slightly, but her kidneys were showing new signs of stress. He said the next 72 hours would tell us a lot. I nodded, thanked him, and the second he left, I went straight back to that phone in my hand. Because now I didn't just want to find Logan Baker. I wanted to know exactly how much of my daughter's life he'd been quietly taking apart while she wasn't looking, and how much more he was about to try to take now that she couldn't stop him. That's when I saw the notification pop up on her banking app, still logged in from her phone. A transfer request, $42,000, pending approval. Logan's name on the request. Submitted an hour ago.
I stared at that pending transfer until the numbers blurred. $42,000. Logan's name right there on the request, time-stamped an hour before I even walked into that hospital room. I wasn't a banker, I wasn't a lawyer, but 28 years of triage teaches you one thing. You stop the bleeding first, ask questions after. I called Olivia's bank from the hospital hallway, my voice as steady as I could make it. Told them that I was her father, that she was incapacitated in the ICU, that there was a fraudulent transfer request pending on her account. The rep on the line was polite but firm. They couldn't discuss account details without proper authorization, incapacitated daughter or not. Rules were rules, she said. I understood the rule. I hated the rule. I hung up and called the one person who could actually move fast, our family lawyer, Thomas Reyes. He'd handled things for us since Olivia's mother passed, years back. He picked up on the second ring, and I laid it all out in order. The ICU, the 16 days she'd been alone, the apartment on Colfax, the 2 plane tickets to Cabo, and the transfer sitting in her account right now waiting on approval. Logan didn't waste time being shocked. That's why I called him first. Does Logan have power of attorney? Not that I know of. Then that transfer needs a live signature or a verified biometric approval. If she's sedated, he can't push it through without committing outright fraud. But Gabriel, if he's desperate enough to try this while she's in a coma, this isn't his first attempt, and it won't be his last. He told me to get to a branch in person with whatever ID and hospital paperwork I had on me, and he'd fax an emergency letter over within the hour. I only left Olivia's room after Nurse Yasmin swore she'd call the second anything changed with her numbers. The branch was 15 minutes away. I sat in the parking lot longer than I want to admit, hands still on the wheel, trying to get my face to look like a normal, calm father instead of a man who wanted to put his fist through the nearest wall. Inside, a branch manager, younger guy, maybe 30, name tag said Ashton, pulled up the account after I handed over my ID and Olivia's hospital admission papers. He went quiet reading the screen. Too quiet. "Sir, this isn't the first attempt. There were 2 smaller transfers that already went through last week. $8,000, then $11,000 3 days later. $19,000. Gone. Before I'd even landed in Denver, before I even knew she was sick." I asked where the money went. He said he couldn't release receiving account details without a subpoena, but he could flag the account and freeze all pending transfers immediately. I told him to do it right now while I stood there watching. Then he said something that stuck with me since. Whoever's been submitting these had her actual passwords, not guesses, not resets, her real login every time. That meant one thing. This wasn't some stranger who hacked an account. This was somebody who'd sat beside her for years, watched her type those passwords in 100 times, and waited. I drove back to the hospital, replaying every version of Logan I thought I knew, and that's when Harley called again. "Gabriel, I ran the second name on that Cabo ticket." He paused, the kind of pause that tells you he doesn't want to say what's coming. "It's Louise Reyes, same woman from the Colfax apartment." So it wasn't some fling he'd stumbled into. It was a plan, an apartment already leased, a getaway already booked, and my daughter's savings quietly bleeding out while she couldn't even open her eyes to see it happening. I walked back through the ICU doors just as Dr. Perry was stepping out of Olivia's room, and something in his face made me stop cold before he even spoke. "Mr. Barnes, we need to talk. Her oxygen dropped about 10 minutes ago. We had to increase ventilator support to compensate." My stomach dropped, but he wasn't finished. "There's something else. Someone called the nurses' station twice this afternoon asking detailed questions about her condition and her expected discharge timeline. They wouldn't give a name, and when the charge nurse asked for one, they hung up." I asked what kind of questions. Whether she was expected to make decisions on her own anytime soon, and whether family had been notified yet. I looked through the glass at my daughter, tubes running into her arm, machines breathing for her, and I understood exactly what that call was about. Somebody wanted to know how much time they had left before I found out everything.
Dr. Perry's words sat in my chest like a stone I couldn't swallow. Whether family had been notified yet. Somebody was keeping score on my daughter's life like it was a countdown clock. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the chair beside her bed, watching the ventilator rise and fall, running the timeline over in my head. 16 days alone. $19,000 gone. A woman named Louise Reyes with a leased apartment and a plane ticket. And now somebody calling the nurses' station asking when she'd wake up, not out of worry, but out of timing. Around 6 in the morning, my phone rang. Unknown number, area code I didn't recognize at first. I stepped into the hallway to answer. "Where the hell have you been?" His voice, Logan. I let the silence sit a second before I answered. That's supposed to be my question. "Look, I heard Olivia's in the hospital. I've been dealing with work crisis out of state. I just got the messages." "Don't." I kept my voice flat, the same voice I used to use telling families the worst news in a triage tent. Loud doesn't work in those moments. Flat does. "I've seen your location history, Logan. You've been 40 minutes from this hospital the entire time, not out of state, not anywhere near a work crisis." The line went quiet. "I also know about the apartment on Colfax, and Louise, and the 2 tickets to Cabo, and the $19,000 that came out of Olivia's account while she was too sick to even sign her own name. You don't understand the situation.
I understand it fine. My daughter drove herself to the ER at 2 in the morning alone because you didn't answer your phone. She's been on a ventilator for over 2 weeks, and somebody called that ICU yesterday asking how much longer before she wakes up. That wasn't a worried husband. That was somebody on a clock. Another long pause, and then his voice changed, colder, done pretending. You froze the transfer. I did. That's my money, too. We're married. That's the first honest thing you've said. I felt something settle in me, calm and sharp at the same time. You come to this hospital, Logan. You look at what you did to her, where you don't, and you explain that to a judge instead. He hung up. I stood in that hallway a long time before I went back in. Nurse Yasmin was adjusting Olivia's IV line and glanced up at me. You okay? Her husband knows we're on to him. She didn't say anything, just nodded slow, the way people do when they've seen this kind of thing before and know exactly where it's headed. Thomas called an hour later. He'd managed to get an emergency freeze extended across 2 more accounts once the bank flagged the fraud pattern, and he'd filed paperwork requesting I be granted temporary decision-making authority given Olivia's condition and Logan's demonstrated absence. He also had news I wasn't ready for. Gabriel, I pulled property records out of curiosity. That Colfax apartment, the lease started 8 months ago. But there's something else. 6 weeks ago, Logan took out a life insurance policy on Olivia, $400,000. I didn't say anything for a second. Couldn't. It's not illegal to have a policy on a spouse, Thomas said carefully, but the timing, paired with everything else, I think we need to loop in the hospital's security team and possibly the police. I looked through the glass at my daughter's face, pale under the fluorescent light, machines keeping her alive minute by minute. 6 weeks ago, around the same time those password logins showed up that weren't hers. That afternoon, hospital security called me down to the front desk. A man matching Logan's description had come to the check-in counter 20 minutes ago, asking which room Olivia was in and what time visiting hours ended. He never made it past the front desk. Security had already been briefed to hold him for hospital administration. I walked down there myself, and when I turned the corner into the lobby, Logan was standing there in a wrinkled shirt, unshaven, staring at his phone, and next to him, arms crossed, wearing sunglasses indoors like she owned the place, was Louise Reyes.
Logan looked up first. His face went through about 3 expressions before he settled on the one he probably practiced. Sad, wounded, like he was the one who'd been wronged. Louise didn't even bother with an expression. She just stood there, arms crossed, sunglasses on, indoors, looking at me like I was an inconvenience standing between her and something she already considered hers. "Gabriel," Logan said, stepping toward me, "I came to see her." "You came to check the timeline," I said, "same as whoever called the nurses' station yesterday, asking when she'd wake up." His jaw tightened. Behind him, the security guard who'd flagged him at the desk stood close enough to hear everything. "I don't know what you think you know, but you're twisting all of this." $19,000 isn't twisted. That's a number, Logan. The apartment on Colfax isn't twisted. The 2 tickets to Cabo with her name replaced by hers, I nodded at Louise, aren't twisted. And the $400,000 policy you took out on her 6 weeks ago isn't twisted either. For the first time, Louise's face moved, just slightly, like that last part was news to her too. "That's a completely normal thing for married couples to do," Logan said too fast. "Sure, normal timing too. Right around when somebody started logging into her accounts with her real passwords. Real strange coincidence, all of it, stacking up right when she got sick and couldn't ask questions.
"I want to see my wife," he said, trying to step past me. I didn't move. 28 years of holding my ground in far worse rooms than a hospital lobby, and I wasn't about to lose it here. "You can't legally stop me from seeing my own wife." "Yes, I can, actually," said a voice behind me. Thomas. He'd driven straight from his office the second I called him from the hallway, papers in hand. As of 2 hours ago, a judge granted Gabriel temporary medical decision authority, given your documented absence during her hospitalization and the financial irregularities under investigation. You're welcome to have your attorney contact mine. Logan's face went white, then red. Louise had already started backing toward the door, pulling her phone out, clearly recalculating something in real time. "This isn't over," he said, pointing a finger at me the way people do when they know they've already lost. "That's my wife, that's my money." I said quietly, "It was never your money, and after everything you've done, I don't think it's your wife either. Not anymore." He looked past me toward the ICU doors, like some part of him understood he'd already lost whatever he came here hoping to salvage. Then he turned and walked out, Louise trailing a few steps behind him, already on a call with someone. Security followed them out to make sure they didn't circle back. I stood in that lobby a long moment before heading back up to the ICU. Thomas caught my arm gently. "The DA's office wants to talk about the insurance policy and the activity account. This might go further than a divorce, Gabriel." "Let it," I said, "whatever it takes." Back in her room, Olivia's numbers were holding steady. Dr. Perry told me the increased ventilator support from the day before had done its job, and they were optimistic about reducing it again by morning. I sat down next to her bed, took her hand the way I had every day since I found her, and told her everything: the transfer, the apartment, Louise, the insurance policy, all of it. I don't know how much she could hear, but I needed her to know, whenever she woke up, that she hadn't been alone in this. Not really. Not from the moment I walked through that door. 3 weeks later, she opened her eyes for good. It took her a long time to understand everything I told her, longer to stop blaming herself for missing what was in front of her the whole time, but she got there. And the day the DA's office filed charges against Logan for financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, Olivia asked me one question: "Dad, why didn't I see it?" "Because you trusted him," I said. "That's not a flaw. That's just what happens when somebody spends years teaching you to look the other way." She's stronger now, living on her own terms, rebuilding slowly the way people do after something like this. And every time I see her laugh again, really laugh, I remember standing in that lobby, and I know coming home early that day was the best decision I ever made.